Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as we sow flower seeds that need to be started indoors 6 to 8 weeks before your average last frost date. So let's go. I live in New Hampshire. I garden in USDA Zone 5B. Based on my zip code, my average last frost date is around May 15th. Today is March 29th. I'm about 6.5 weeks away from my average last frost date. Today we're going to be sowing the seeds for China Aster, Cleome, Salvia, as well as Tithonia. What I'll also do is in the description, I'll add links to any other videos that I've made having to do with starting seeds 6 to 8 weeks before your average last frost date. And if you want to just skip to the section where I talk about how to sow these seeds, go to the timestamp shown below. When it comes to starting seeds, it's not based on your hardiness zone. It's actually based on your location and your average last frost date. If you don't know what that date is, check out the website below, enter in your zip code, and it should give you an approximate date. There's also a map on there that you can look at that's a little more accurate. Another way you can find your average last frost date is just by doing a simple internet search. You can say something like, when is my average last frost date? Put in your location and it should give you a date. I like to grow a lot of plants, both indoors under my grow lights as well as outdoors using the winter sowing method. The reason is I have a lot of plants in my yard that I like to enjoy, but I also grow a lot of plants to sell as part of my backyard plant nursery. If you like the videos that you watch on my channel, please hit the thumbs up button below. It really helps my channel out, but it also sends my videos out to other people who might also enjoy my content. When it comes to seed starting, there's a lot of great information that you can find on a seed packet, but oftentimes the seed packet doesn't have all the information that you need in order to start that particular seed. And since I like to collect a lot of my seeds, I don't have any instructions. So in order to find information, I often do a search on the internet. And I have a spreadsheet that I keep track of with all my seeds, and I like to populate that spreadsheet with important information. Some of the information that I keep track of is how deep to plant the seed, or if it needs light to germinate, whether or not the plant will need to be pinched or not in order to encourage branching, the optimal soil temperature that the seed needs in order to germinate, and the approximate days for the seed to germinate. There are a lot of great reputable websites out there that have information that you're looking for when it comes to starting seeds indoors. A few of the websites that I like to go to in order to collect data include Ball Seed, Botanical Interests, Johnny's Selected Seeds, as well as Outside Pride. There are also people's blog pages that you can find information on. Personally, I don't like to just go to blog pages because I don't know who those people are and I'm not sure how knowledgeable they are when it comes to starting seeds. I'm not knocking it. I'm sure that there's a lot of great information out there, but personally, I like to just go to companies and different companies' websites and gather general information from all of those sites. So for example, if one site says the soil temperature should be 60 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit and another site says 62 to 70 degrees Fahrenheit, I might just put an average between those and put that in my spreadsheet. But bottom line is always do your own research and try to get your information from a place where you feel comfortable getting that information from. Every year when it comes to seed starting, I start off on a great foot. With winter sowing, I start shortly after the winter solstice and I start sowing all my perennial seeds outside. When it comes to indoor sowing, I do a great job with sowing all those seeds that you start early on, let's say 12 or 14 weeks before your average last frost date. Geraniums or impatiens, begonia, coleus, plants like that. But then once I hit the seeds that you want to start around 8 weeks before your average last frost date, I always fall short. And I wondered the other day, why is that? And I think some of the reasons are I end up being so overly consumed with the plants that I'm starting indoors that are under my grow lights that I kind of lose track. Also, I lose space. I end up running out of room under my lights, and I know some of you are running into the same boat. And then finally, the weather starts warming up outside. So between doing my indoor seed starting of the plants I started during the winter months, coupled with going outside and working in the yard, I basically end up running out of time with starting any of the seeds that need to be started 8 weeks or less before my average last frost date. I set a goal for myself this year, and I said, not again. This year, I'm going to be better about starting those seeds that need to be started 8 weeks or less before my average last frost date. So I spent a lot of time. I went through my whole entire bin of seeds, and I pulled out only the flower seeds that need to be started between 6 to 8 weeks before my average last frost date. And there were so many seeds. I couldn't believe how many seeds there were. And while I was going through all of those seeds, I was very diligent about updating my spreadsheet so that next year I'll have better tracking with when to start what seeds and what requirements each of those seeds need. Some of these seeds are fairly new. I just recently collected them, and some of the seeds are pretty old. My goal is not necessarily to start all of the seeds, but to start a little bit of each of the seeds, and we'll see what kind of germination rate I end up getting. On average, many of these seeds need about 70 degrees Fahrenheit in order to germinate, but I'll be sure to pop up the exact information that I found on the screen as I start sowing the seeds. I plan on starting almost all the seeds on a seedling heat mat. There was one seed that specifically said, do not put it on a seedling heat mat, but other than that one seed, everything else will get started on a seedling heat mat. And the reason is, I just want to get these seeds going. I'm a little behind because some of them should have been started probably 8 to 10 weeks ago. So I just want to jumpstart the seeds. I will say if your grow room is about 70 degrees Fahrenheit and you're fairly new to starting seeds indoors, use your own judgment. I would recommend maybe not using a seedling heat mat if you're fairly new to starting seeds. And the reason is when it comes to seedling heat mats, even though they're great and they can get your seeds germinating a little bit quicker, on the flip side, what can happen is that the soil can end up drying out a lot faster. And unless you're very diligent about checking all of your seeds and seeing if the soil's drying out and then giving them some water, you might want to skip using a seedling heat mat. It really is up to you. But I just wanted to explain that I am going to be using the seedling heat mat and why I'm going to be using it. We have a ton of seeds to sow, so let's get sowing. Here I have some seed starting mix. I like to make my own seed starting mix, and I'll put a link to a video down in the description. It's basically 2 parts of peat moss, but you can use cocoa coir, to 1 part of very fine vermiculite. And then I add a small pinch of dolomite lime, which helps offset the pH of the peat moss. When it comes to starting seeds, I prefer to use seed starting mix. It's not that expensive because I make my own. You can definitely use potting mix if you like. I also poured boiling hot water on my seed starting mix. You want to use pre-moistened seed starting mix, but also the boiling hot water helps kill any possible fungus gnat eggs that might be in here. When I squeeze my seed starting mix, notice there's no water dripping out. But when I let go, it's holding its form, and that's the right consistency that you want for your seed starting or potting mix. I like to use restaurant takeout containers because honestly they're free to me and they make wonderful little greenhouses. In fact, this one has little vent holes in it, which is wonderful because in case it gets too hot in there. And I did make holes in the bottom of the container because you want to bottom water your seedlings. You don't ever want to water them from above because that can introduce all sorts of problems. So I'm going to go ahead and add my seed starting mix to my container. And now I'm going to press on the seed starting mix. I want to take out any air pockets that might be in there. I don't want to press too hard because I don't want to compact the seed starting mix too much. China Asters like to be started 6 to 8 weeks before your average last frost date. They need light to germinate, and the seeds germinate best when the soil temperature is about 70 to 72 degrees Fahrenheit. I will be using a seedling heat mat, but if your grow room stays that warm, then the seedling heat mat is optional. The seeds should germinate sometime within 10 to 14 days. I will preface it by saying that these are old seeds. There's no guarantee that they're going to germinate, and that is true for any of your seeds that are older. But the way I look at it is it's better to sow them heavily, and even if 1 or 2 seeds germinate, it's fine. So there aren't many seeds left in this packet, but we're going to be sowing these seeds, and you can see they're a mix of different colors. And it's hard to read all the information on the back, but you can see that there is some basic information. And when you see that the depth to sow is about 1/4 of an inch, as long as you're sowing the seeds so that they're not very deep, you should be fine. And if you want, you can always cover them with a light layer of vermiculite. I had done my research and I had found that it's okay to just press the seeds into the soil surface. These seeds are very, very old, so I'd be surprised if they even germinate. But it's worth trying. These are a salmon red aster. And again, if you're going to cover the seeds, cover them with just about 1/4 of an inch of fine soil. These seeds are quite old as well, so we'll find out together if any of them germinate. These seeds are seeds that I collected. They're a few years old. I'm hopeful that they should germinate. It's always a good idea to put labels, especially if you have different varieties or colors of the same plant. And in this case, I am putting down the date that was on the seeds, just so I know that these are the super old seeds, that these seeds are a little bit fresher, and then today's date. And I added dividers so that I can separate the different kind of seeds. I like to mass sow or multi-sow seeds in a small container like this so that it saves room under my grow lights. It's also a great way to check the germination of seeds. If these seeds aren't going to germinate, then I didn't waste a lot of space under my grow lights, and I also didn't waste a lot of time. Let's go ahead and sow these seeds first, and that's what the seeds look like. There aren't a lot of seeds, so I'm just spreading them out the best that I can. I highly encourage you to do this. If you have seeds that are old, there's no use in wasting 6 cell packs and space under your lights. But I get it that, let's say all of these seeds germinated. Now I need to pot them up, and that's additional work. I don't mind that process, and it's relaxing and I enjoy it. But if it's something that you don't want to do, you can definitely go ahead and just sow the seeds directly in 6 cell packs. I'm just pressing them down. And again, if I wanted to cover them, I could just barely cover them. When I did my research on these seeds, I found that it said that they need light to germinate. That's why I'm not covering them. If you wanted to use something like very fine vermiculite, you could do that. It would allow light to come in, but it would also keep it so that the seeds don't dry out as you wait for them to germinate. And next we're going to sow the salmon red aster. There's quite a few seeds in there. Again, if only 1 or 2 of them germinate, I'll be happy, given how old the seeds are. Some of you might be wondering, why do I have all these old seeds? A lot of times when I start sowing my seeds, I start in the winter time. And by the time I am ready to sow any seeds that need to be started, 6 weeks or 8 weeks before my average last frost date, I usually run out of space under my grow lights. I know that sounds silly, but I do like to start certain plants like impatiens or geraniums, begonias, peppers. There are plants that need to be started much earlier, and then I end up running out of room under my lights. But this year I told myself, it was a goal of mine to sow all of these seeds, or as many as I can, that need to be sown 8 weeks or less before my average last frost date, because these seeds are doing no good just sitting there in my seed bin. And that way, next year I can start fresh. If even a few of these germinate, that's great, and then I can collect the seeds from them, and I'll have new fresh seeds to start with. And if none of these germinate, that's fine too. At least I cleaned it out of my seed bucket, and then I can go shopping for new aster seeds or any other new seeds that I want to get that are fresher. But the good thing is, doing this process not only cleans these seeds out of my seed bin, I did the research that I needed to do and the requirements that this seed as well as other seeds need to germinate. And then I'll have that information logged in my spreadsheet so that in the future, I know exactly what the seed needs in order to germinate. And now these are the seeds that I had collected. And I'm imagining that these seeds that I collected were from this plant over here because they seem like a similar name. But I really don't remember, to be honest with you. But bottom line is, let's hope that these seeds germinate since they're only a few years old. And yes, we're going to sow all of the seeds in the seed packet because I am cleaning up shop here. I am getting rid of all of these seeds, and we're going to see what happens with all of the seeds here. When I planted the aster in my yard a few years ago, they looked so pretty when they bloomed. They really are a pretty flower. And in reality, if I was to do what I'm doing right now over again, I probably would have moved this divider over here more because you can see that there are a lot of seeds I'm putting in here. And these are fresher seeds, so there's probably a higher chance these are going to germinate. That's okay. Like I said, once they start germinating, I'm going to be pricking them out individually, and I'm going to be potting them up into 6 cell packs. But then I will go ahead and cover this back up with the humidity dome, and then I will put this back on my seedling heat mat. As more seeds hopefully germinate, I will continue that process. And any of the plants that germinate that get potted up into 6 cell packs, those will not have a humidity dome on. Those will not be on a seedling heat mat. And we're going to go ahead and press the rest of these seeds in. And the reason we're pressing seeds in is to make sure that the seeds make good contact with the seed starting mix. Even if you were to cover any of your seeds during your seed starting journey, you always want to press the seeds into the seed starting mix. I'm going to go ahead and give it a nice little spritz of water. That keeps the seeds wet. It also helps settle them more into the seed starting mix. So I'm going to go ahead and add this cover. Notice that it's clear. And that's good because these seeds need light to germinate, and that will allow light to come in. This will also keep the seeds moist. Now, if you don't have a cover like this, you could use something like clear plastic wrap. I'll be placing this on a seedling heat mat. You don't have to do that if your house or your grow room is warm enough. These will be under LED shop lights. They come on at 5 a.m. They go off at 9 p.m. They're on a timer. I have a bunch of Cleome seeds, and these are all seeds that have been collected. You want to start Cleome seeds 6 to 8 weeks before your average last frost date. The seeds need light to germinate, so we'll be pressing the seeds into the soil surface. The seeds germinate between 70 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit soil temperature. I'm planning to put these seeds on a seedling heat mat, and the seeds should germinate sometime between 7 to 14 days. Once Cleome seedlings start to emerge and get a little bit bigger, they can benefit from being pinched back to make a bushier plant. I made my labels. This one here that says Pam, I'm growing some plants for my friend who also has a backyard plant nursery. She'll be selling some of her plants. I'll be selling some of mine as part of my backyard plant nursery. And that's true for many of the plants that I'm starting for seed this year. And since a lot of these seeds are fairly new, they were collected within the last year or two, I'm not going to be sowing all of the seeds in each of the seed packet. The reason is I don't need that many plants, and also I'm expecting very good germination. So based on that, I would rather sow part of the seeds. And for whatever reason, if there was an issue with the seeds germinating, I have more seeds as a backup and I can always resow those seeds. We'll start with these seeds first. I don't know the colors, so it'll be interesting to find out what color they are. And that's a close-up of what the seeds look like. Let's start sprinkling them on the surface, but I don't expect that we're going to start all of these because that's a lot of seeds. Many of these plants are new to me when it comes to growing them from seed. I do know when it comes to Cleome that it does self-sow pretty readily. There's an area where I garden. It's basically a public garden space that I've adopted. And there has been Cleome that has come back year after year. So I know that when it drops its seeds, oftentimes I end up with freebie plants. Again, I'm sowing these very heavily. You don't have to do that. And I'm sowing them in a restaurant takeout container. You don't have to do that. You can do it in a 6-cell pack. I'm only going to sow that many seeds for my friend Pam. If I end up with very good germination, I'll end up sowing more seeds probably within the next week, just so that she has additional plants. But I want to see how these do first. I'm going to press them in. And after I press these in, we are just going to keep on going, and we're going to just quickly sow the rest of our Cleome seeds. Now that that's on, this will get placed on a seedling heat mat. I've collected the seeds of many plants, including Cleome. I'll put links to how to collect the seeds from these certain plants in the description below in case you want to check that out. Some of these I don't know when the seeds were collected, and some of them are just a few years old. Again, I will only be sowing some of the seeds, not all of the seeds. When it comes to starting salvia seeds, I found that it's going to vary. Sometimes you want to start them 6 to 8 weeks, other times 10 to 12 weeks before your average last frost date. It basically comes to researching your salvia seed and making sure you're starting it at the right time. Also, sometimes it says to cover the seeds lightly, and other times it says they need light to germinate. I plan on just surface sowing them, and we'll see how they do. Salvia seeds need about 70 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit soil temperature in order to germinate. I'll be placing these on a seedling heat mat. Germination should happen about 5 to 10 days after sowing the seeds, and you want to pinch back your salvia seeds in order to encourage bushiness in your plant. I will also share that all of these seeds are very old. So when it comes to all these seed packets, I'm going to be sowing all the seeds in each of those seed packets. And when it comes to the seeds that I've collected, since they're not very old, I'll only be sowing part of the seeds, not all of them. The next set of seeds we're going to sow are Tithonia. You want to sow the seeds 6 to 8 weeks before your average last frost date. They need light to germinate, so you want to press them into the soil surface or just barely cover them. The seeds will germinate when the soil temperature is between 70 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, so I will be placing these on a seedling heat mat. You should start seeing germination for the seedlings around 7 to 14 days after sowing the seeds. The seedlings can benefit from being pinched back, which will ensure that you have a bushier plant with more blooms. I do want to point out one thing. These seeds right here, I must have collected them a long time ago. You tell me, I think those are cosmos. But doesn't matter. We're going to plant them, and if they're cosmos, they will come up, but you'll see what I mean. They do not look anything like a Tithonia. Also, I am sowing these from my friend Pam, again for her backyard plant nursery. When it comes to the seed packets that don't have a lot of seeds in them, I'll just sow all of them. You can see that I had opened the seed packet before, and it is very old. So we're going to be sowing all the seeds from this packet. As you're waiting for the seeds to germinate, if you notice that the soil is starting to dry out, you can just give the top layer a small spritz of water. However, once the seedlings start to emerge, at that point you should start bottom watering. I'll make additional videos once the seedlings have germinated, when I get to potting them up, fertilizing them, pinching any seedlings back that need to be pinched back, and then finally hardening off and getting the seedlings out in my landscape. Let me know in the comments if you are growing any of these plants, either from seed or from plants that you've bought from the nursery. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening.